So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming today and for the attention you paid. My name is Maxim Behar, and I'm the president of the World Communications Forum Association. We are doing every year the famous Davos Communications Summit. With me is Vasilena Kalisheva, who is our program director and membership manager also. But the most important person today will be our good friend, Jared Meade, and MPS, APR, whatever. Jared will explain what is this. It should be something much more than professor, and much more than PhD or doctor, whatever, because MPS, APR is something which is directly connected with our business. So PR does more. I mean, we know that PR does more. We are going to forums, summits, meetings. We participate in discussions, masterclasses, and every single day we wake up. How we wake up? Well, we wake up with a mobile phone, lying on the bed, and looking at the news. And sometimes when we read the news, we say, what can we do more today? Today, not tomorrow, because tomorrow will be late already. Jared is a global strategic communications consultant. He's an educated writer with more than 20 years of experience in public relations and reputation management. He's the founder of Rain Strategy Group and the valued global advisory board member of our WCFA, World Communications Forum. Most important, Jared comes from the United States of America. And why I'm telling most important? Because US is the motherland of our business. US and lately UK, and after UK, Spain, especially Barcelona in Spain, right, Ima? Because that's the business center of the country. I mean, that's the motherland, really, of the public relations business. Today, Jared will talk to us how to move people, not just metrics, designing PR that shifts behavior and building trust, proving communications impact with data that even a CFO will believe and support. He will talk about practical strategies for creating campaigns that shape perception and even policy. And of course, ethics, ethics, ethics. Because when they ask me in TV studios or talk shows or podcasts, what is PR? And then I say it's so simple, to say the truth in a way people understand it. But the truth is the ethics, is the transparency, is the fair business, and the truth is the base. And then to do it in a way that people understand it is the creative part of our job. We should do it in a way that people understand this truth. And with these words, I would like to welcome Jared Meade and to give him the floor again, with thanks to all our guests and special thanks to Jared. And don't forget, and I will tell you at the end, you should subscribe to our Davos Communication Summit in April. It's so close to Barcelona. You can drive in even to Davos. You'll enjoy beautiful Spanish landscape, and then you see the Swiss mountains. Thank you, Jared.
All right. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. Can everyone see my screen? I just want to make sure it's sharing correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Maxim, thank you for that introduction. As Maxim said, I'm Jared Meade, founder and principal of Rain Strategy Group. The MPS is just my master's in professional studies. I have a master's from George Washington University in strategic public relations. The APR is just my accreditation in public relations through the PRSA Association. So at Rain Strategy Group, we focus on reputation management and crisis communication. So I want to welcome you guys today to PR Does More, where we're going to talk about how public relations shapes markets, movements, and minds. We're going to go over quite a bit, so I'm going to try to move through this quickly, but hopefully at the end we'll have a couple minutes if there are any questions. So we're going to kind of look at a few case studies, very high level, but give you some insight into how those case studies used public relations to shape whether it's markets, movements, or minds. And also, as Maxim talked about, we're going to look at the ethics of it, because public relations is at its core a tool that can be used for good or for bad. And so we have a responsibility as professionals to really understand the power behind what we do and to make sure that we're using those tactics, those tools as ethically as possible. So this morning, before, as Maxim said, before you checked your phone, before you scrolled through social media, before you made a purchase decision, there was an invisible force already at work. The stock prices that you might have glanced at, the cause that you felt compelled to support, the product that you just couldn't resist buying, it was all shaped by that same invisible force. And we call that force public relations. And for many of us, we're practicing public relations, so I know what you may be thinking. You already know what PR is. You've written press releases, you've pitched journalists, you've managed social media, but the truth is, for most public relations professionals, what they're practicing day to day is more tactics. And what I want to talk about and show you is that PR at its highest level is not only strategic, but it's also psychological. It's the application of behavioral frameworks that literally shapes markets, ignites movements, and rewires how millions of people think. So I want to begin with a moment in the history of PR that illustrates just how much power and influence our industry has. So before we talk about markets and movements, let's look back at one of the big experiments in engineered perception. And honestly, it's one of the most ethically complicated moments in PR history as well. So in 1929, for those of you who don't know, this is a picture of Edward Bernays, known as the founder of public relations. And in 1929, the American Tobacco Company hired Edward Bernays because they had a very simple problem. Women weren't smoking, and they wanted them to. But the real obstacle wasn't the marketing, it was culture. Women smoking in public was seen as scandalous. It was a violation of social norms. So what did Bernays do? He hired a group of debutantes during a 1929 Easter parade, and instructed them to light up what he branded, not cigarettes, but torches of freedom. Suddenly, smoking wasn't just smoking. It was about liberation. It was participation in a rising movement for women's rights. And just like that, a taboo was shattered, not because of the product, but because of the story that Bernays had wrapped around that product. And this is a moment when PR stopped being just about publicity and became about behavior engineering.
Uh,
It's an early
Jared, sorry to
yes.
interrupt, but we can't see the screen. I mean, we see a small window on top of your screen that says audience window.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes.
You have to, I think, close it.
Oh yes, it's
There. Thank
Ah,
you.
sorry.
Sorry.
No, thank you
Muchas gracias.
thank you for letting me know. So this is just an early example of a narrative value action. So when a behavior aligns with what people want, they tend to adopt it. So in the beginning, women weren't wanting to smoke, but once Bernays kind of created the story that smoking was more about women's rights, about their freedom to do so, then the women smoking really kind of took off. So again, when a behavior aligns with what people want, they adopt it, even if that underlying product never really changed. So cigarettes and smoking never really changed, but the story at this time around what smoking meant for women did. Therefore, more women started to smoke. So was Bernays' campaign effective? Absolutely. Was it ethical? Not really. And Bernays himself later even regretted this campaign. He was even quoted as saying, "An age-old custom I learned could be broken down by a dramatic appeal, disseminated by the network of media. Of course, the taboo was not destroyed completely, but a beginning had been made, and it's one I regret." And for those of you who don't know about Bernays, his wife ended up later in life passing from lung cancer. So again, this campaign was one that he always went back to and said he greatly regretted kind of the work he had done and the story that he had created around why women should smoke more. And I tell this story because the more we understand how public relations techniques work, the better equipped we are to not only recognize when they're being used unethically to manipulate, but also we understand our responsibility that we have to carry and use these tools ethically. So that's the contract as public relations professionals that we enter into. So I want to start where it probably matters for most of you today, how PR shapes markets. And here's something that Wall Street doesn't really want us to fully understand or grasp. Markets aren't really rational. They never have been. They're narrative driven emotional ecosystems that we like to disguise as spreadsheets. Numbers don't move markets, it's the stories about those numbers that move markets. So, we're going to go into a few case studies and kind of talk about what makes these compelling stories that actually will change behavior and move campaigns. So I'm going to share with you what I'm calling the narrative value equation. And I want you to remember this formula as we're going through these case studies. So the narrative value equation is if you have a compelling story, you tie that with strategic timing, and you can tie into an audience belief, that story can move markets. When you nail all three of these things, you can either create billions in value for an organization, or depending on how these tactics are used, you risk erasing billions in seconds. We also want to remember as we go through these case studies that compelling stories tend to do one of three things, or all three at the same time. It creates an emotional connection. So we connect with our audiences on an emotional level. We create cognitive ease with the stories that we tell. So when it's something that's familiar, simple, easy to understand, people tend to cling on to that as a truth and believe in that. Or we create the bandwagon effect, where individuals adopt beliefs or behaviors just because they see others doing it as well. We also want to remember that these compelling stories and these case studies that I'll share, you'll notice they each have one, if not all, of these characteristics, but they usually will have at least one of the following. It's going to be a charismatic leader, a grand vision, an exponential growth promise, or a narrative of us versus them. So we're going to go into our first case study. So it's 1997, the year I graduated high school. Seems like ages ago, but Apple is dying. It's not just struggling. The stock market is it's sorry, it's not just struggling, but the company itself is actually dying. The stock market is down for Apple's. It's down 70% from the early 90s highs. At this time, analysts were predicting bankruptcy for the organization within 12 months. The media was openly mocking the company as a cautionary tale. Their market share happened to be shrinking, and they had no coherent identity. But then something happened in 1997. For those of you who don't know, Steve Jobs, who was a founder of Apple, was forced out of the company. In 1997, he came back. But what's interesting about when he came back is what he did. He didn't start rebuilding Apple by changing products, coming up with new products. What he did is he approved a campaign that started working on the perception of Apple, not the products. And so I'm going to real quick show you a quick video, and then we'll move on.
Here's to the crazy ones, the rebels, troublemakers, ones who see things differently. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
So again, it's September 1997, and the Think Differently campaign comes out, talking about here's to the crazy ones: Einstein, Gandhi, Picasso. It's not a product ad. They don't really even mention Apple until you see the logo at the end. What it was a philosophical reset. It didn't sell a product, it didn't sell features. What it sold was a belief in a worldview. And so, what I want us to look at is just from that campaign, kind of what were the after effects and kind of what did that campaign do for Apple? So, first, it created an emotional reconnection with consumers and investors. After that campaign came out, stock prices for Apple rose 150% within the first year. And this was before any major product launches or relaunches. The campaign became a bridge between Apple's past and its future. And the brand transformed from being a failing manufacturer to really a cultural movement. And anyone who loves Apple products will know it really is a movement. People feel a sense of belonging when they buy Apple products. And usually, no matter what happens when you're an Apple user, it never changes how much you love Apple and their products. So let's look kind of a little deeper at some of the strategic breakdown. And I want to look at four key things that happened. One is Apple repositioned their narrative. So they stopped being about a tech company and became a creative icon. Again, the same products were being sold initially, but they completely changed their story of who Apple was when Steve Jobs came back. Then they created this emotional ownership with their consumers. So consumers didn't just buy products, but they saw themselves in the brand. So it was much more about belonging to something bigger and not just buying a product. The third thing was cultural alignment. By linking two icons of human progress, people who had actually changed the world in the way we lived in that world, Apple was redefining innovation as more of artistry rather than just engineering. And they were connecting themselves to those icons. And the last thing is they really worked on investor psychology. So the brand story built confidence before the fundamentals caught up. So when Steve Jobs came back and they ran this ad campaign, their reputation really preceded the uptick in revenue. So in a few slides ago, we talked about the narrative value equation. So I want to look at kind of how Apple's story fits into that. So again, we start with compelling story. So Apple was celebrating the rebels, the innovators, the nonconformists, the visionaries. So that was their compelling story. The timing was perfect because, as I mentioned, Steve Jobs had just returned. It was being seen as a hopeful return that he was going to turn the company around. Jobs himself was seen as a visionary. So they had the story, they had great timing, and then what they did is they tied into the belief, the human belief, that we are all hardwired to seek community. We want to celebrate our individuality, but at the same time, we want to belong to something bigger. We want to belong to a movement, and that's what Apple did. Apple created this movement about what it meant to use their products. So again, they had the story, they had the timing, and then they tied into that belief that we all have, which is what helped move the market for them. So I want to look at a few strategic takeaways from this case study. So the first one is identity over inventory. So we want to remember when we're working on campaigns, working for clients or our organizations, that a company's greatest asset is the story that people tell about them, their reputation. So looking at the case study with Apple, even though they didn't have new products, their revenue wasn't up when they changed that story and made it a story that everyone was telling. It became identity over inventory. I also want to remember that authenticity always wins. So think differently worked because it fit Apple's DNA. It wasn't because they were chasing a trend, but they were telling a story that really went to the core of who Apple was as a company. The third is narrative drives valuation. So the market recovery for Apple began when the public sentiment shifted. It wasn't when their spreadsheet started to improve, but it was really when people bought into the story that they were telling about who Apple was and what they were going to become in the future. And the fourth is vision scales. By elevating their purpose above their products, Apple set the stage for what is one of the greatest corporate turnarounds in history. So again, it was really about selling that vision to the public. Oops, sorry. So I really want to just emphasize that again, for this case study, it was identity over inventory, and that's the lesson that we want to take away from that, is that Apple's greatest asset wasn't in their warehouses, but again, it was the story that people began to tell about them. So now we want to fast forward to August 2018, and a company that probably most of us know, Tesla. Tesla at that time was in what people were calling a production hell. They were losing $718 million per quarter. Wall Street had become skeptical about whether they would survive. Analysts had expected that the company would need to raise capital soon. Even though Elon Musk kept resisting that in public, it was kind of seen that the company was on its way down. But on August 7th, 2018, at 12:48 p.m., Elon Musk tweeted out these 9 words: "Am considering taking Tesla private at 420, funding secured. So that one statement, those 9 words, really kind of started changing things for Tesla. So what happened? First, within 1 minute, their stock jumped $8. By close of that day, it was up nearly 11%. It's estimated that 6.6 billion in market cap was created from those 9 words. Trading had to be halted twice, and the SEC launched an investigation. So with that tweet, there were consequences for Musk and Tesla. So Musk was eventually, as we all know, forced to step down as chairman and pay a $40 million fine. But here's the thing that I want to point out is that the market responded to Musk's tweet before anyone verified any of this information. And so there are really 4 psychological triggers that were engaged when Musk sent out this tweet. So the first one was perception as a market lever. So the market responded again to the signal of confidence, of audacity, and certainly even unverified signals. So again, Musk was so confident in what he said that it caused the market to respond. The next being persona power. This was long before the Musk that we kind of know today, but at the time, he was kind of elevated to this mythic status in the public eye and in the media. So every statement he made became a headline because cult of personality had transformed his words into market moving events. Next was scarcity creation. So by stating that he had already found the funding, Musk implied that there was now becoming a limited availability of kind of buying into Tesla as a shareholder. Then you have a narrative hijacking. So again, Tesla was getting a lot of negative media attention, a lot of negative attention from Wall Street. So in his one tweet, Musk shifted the conversation from production hell to premium valuation opportunity. And so I want to, again, real quick, look at some strategic takeaways from this case study. So again, as I said before, you have the cult of personality. So before Musk's stint in politics, he had been elevated to this mythic status through the media, through messaging, and through his own personal branding. He was framed as a visionary whose every move made headlines. Narrative power moves markets. A single well-timed message, such as Musk's tweets, can shift sentiment and shift billions in market value for an organization. There was I didn't share it on this slide, but there's actually a study that was done, I believe, in 2015 that actually showed that 44% of a company or organization's value comes from the reputation of their CEO. And you definitely see that happening here with the Tesla and Musk case study. Third was you either control the conversation or it controls you. So Musk knew that he had to do something to kind of change the narrative, change the story of what was happening at Tesla. And so his tweet redirected headlines from operational struggle to that valuation dreams. Looking at that valuation narrative value equation that we talked about in the beginning, you can see that Tesla had this story. Their story was that Musk was taking the company private. He was making bold action to protect his shareholders. His timing was perfect in that sense, in that Tesla was in what they were calling production hell. Investors' anxiety was really high, so they were geared to hear something that was going to change Tesla's future. And then also there was that belief that they tied into, and that belief was that the public believed in Musk's reputation as the time as a visionary, as an action taker. They knew he tended to kind of do things on a whim. So when he said something, they believed it. But as I mentioned earlier, we really want to look at the ethics of how public relations is used. And so I want to compare and contrast these 2 case studies for a minute. And I want you to notice the difference that Apple used PR as a constructive amplifier. So their public perception aligned with the reality of the company and their long-term strategy. So their story was authentic. But Musk used the story and public relations and his reputation, the reputation of the company, he used it as a destructive amplifier, meaning that he was manipulating perception for the immediate gain of himself and for Tesla without grounding any of that in verified reality. And so the result for Tesla The result for Apple was a growth and better public reputation. The result for Tesla was regulatory and reputational fallout. So I want us to notice that they used the same tools, but they used different ethics and they had different outcomes. And markets are just one area that we're going to talk about today, but there's another where these techniques, in my opinion, become a little more powerful and potentially a little more dangerous. And so I want to talk about how PR moves or works, excuse me, in movements. So a lot of times the public wants to believe that all movements are organic and they're grassroots uprisings. In fact, some of the most successful movements and the ones that appear kind of overnight to change everything tend to follow a general blueprint. And I want to show you kind of that process. So there's 5 stages that most modern movements tend to follow. Whether that's intentional or more intuitive, they still tend to follow this. So I'll share these 5 stages of this process, and then we'll go into a few case studies and I'll show you how this works as well. So on the first stage of a movement, we have the emotional catalyst. So this is what creates the urgency for the public. It identifies an injustice or a threat. It tends to amplify that emotional response that people are giving to something that's happened. So we want to think of things like the George Floyd video that happened here in the US, Greta Thunberg's climate strikes, or what she's doing now in the war between Israel and Gaza, the Me Too movement. Uh, we'll actually look at the Me Too movement here a little deeper, but each one of these are kind of what we're talking about here with that emotional catalyst. They grabbed onto something that people were already feeling. And that first stage is kind of the emotional hook that really makes the public feel like inaction is impossible. So they feel like there's something they must do because it's that detrimental to society or something that needs to be changed. The second stage of this process is the tribal signal. And so this is what creates that belonging. And it's usually a symbol of some type. It could be pink hats. It could be the symbol of the raised fist, colored ribbons. We see the red poppies that are used to commemorate war veterans. It can be hashtags. So the hashtag Me Too, hashtag Black Lives Matter. It's a shared language that movements create. And they're not just decorative, but they're used to identify and signal that someone belongs to this group, to this movement. The third stage of the process is the action ritual. So this is what creates that commitment. So it's usually a simple, repeatable action. For instance, you'll have like the ice bucket challenge. That was something that people could easily replicate and repeat. There was the posting of the black squares for Black Lives Matter on social media. Again, something easy for everyone to do. And these public declarations to a movement increase our psychological commitment. So once we've publicly declared that we believe in a movement or we're part of a movement, we become more psychologically invested. So again, it's creating that commitment to the movement. The fourth stage is the victory narrative. So this is where we start to create momentum. So a movement will start to celebrate small wins publicly, which then builds the perception that the goal that they're working towards is inevitable, so that history is on the movement side. And really, this is where you see if people hadn't joined the movement in the first 3 stages, they tend to join here at the fourth stage because they see that the movement is gaining momentum and people want to be part of a winning movement or a winning team. And then the last stage is the legacy lock-in. So this is where the movement creates permanence. So it institutionalizes a change. It creates an enforcement mechanism. So think about annual rituals that we have, like here in the U.S. and other places. But so here we have, Black History Month. We have Breast Cancer Awareness Month. These are things that have become embedded in our cultural infrastructure so that we're reminded of these movements every day. And so I want to now move on to showing you with some case studies this process in action. So I had mentioned the Me Too movement earlier. So, for those of you who may not know or remember, on October 15th, back in 2017, the actress Alyssa Milano tweeted out a very short message highlighting two words. Those words were "Me Too." And within 24 hours, 12 million people had posted "Me Too" on Facebook. It looked spontaneous, it looked organic, it looked like overnight viral magic. Uh, but the other part of the story was that it wasn't. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So Tarana Burke had coined the Me Too phrase back in 2006, so 11 years earlier than Alyssa Milano's tweet. And it was part of her grassroots work supporting survivors, particular women, young women of color. For over a decade, she'd built this infrastructure of survivor networks, community trusts, advocacy frameworks, healing language. So this was something that had been going on for years before Me Too became kind of the global movement that it was. In the meantime, from 2015 to 2017, investigative journalists Ronan Farrow, Jodi Kantor, and Megan Toohey were methodically kind of building cases against high-profile abusers of women, especially, as we all know, Harvey Weinstein. So all these things were kind of happening at the same time. And by October 2017, the cultural landscape had shifted here in the US, and I would say also worldwide with social media awareness, feminist activism, corporate expectations were all changing, and the conditions really were primed for the Me Too movement to take off. And so, what was that ignition moment for this movement? It was on October 5th, Weinstein's story broke in the New York Times and also the New Yorker magazine. And then again on October 15th, when Milano tweeted out the Me Too, what happened was the movement had already been kind of building the framework. We had that ignition moment with the story in the New York Times and the New Yorker. And then when she tweeted out Me Too, it provided that simple, shareable, repeatable participation mechanism that people would need to kind of take the movement forward. So again, let's look at kind of what happened and dig a little deeper into some of the strategies at play. So again, within 12 days of Melissa Milano's tweet, 12 million Facebook posts had used the hashtag #MeToo. 9 members of Weinstein's company board had resigned. Within 12 months, 201 prominent figures had been accused, and Time named their person of the year the silence breaker. Um, Also, kind of the public silence had stopped being seen as a safe option, and inaction became reputationally radioactive. So again, we had this cultural shift that was happening at the same time. And going a little deeper, we want to look at kind of what was happening here. So, with the Me Too movement, you had the collective story revelation. So, Me Too cracked that illusion of isolation for victims. This universal framing around a shared human experience really helped women see that they weren't alone. And the shame that they felt flipped into anger, and silence for them kind of became untenable. So, people began to speak out. You also had this identity alignment where people who were supporting the movement, they weren't kind of carefully evaluating each claim. That's not what support of this movement was about. But what they were doing is they were supporting the movement because supporting the movement itself became a reflection of who they saw that they were. So it really was more about identity, not claims. And then 3, you had reputation value inversion. So social norms started to shift. You Before Me Too movement, speaking up when things happened to women and others seemed like a risk to their reputation, to their careers. But after Me Too, staying silent became the risk. So you had that inversion happening. And lastly, it was narrative irreversibility. And what I mean by that is after Me Too kind of showed the systematic scale of what was happening and it became visible, um, the public no longer accepted the isolated incident or the misunderstanding narrative. It collapsed, and people really uh, started to see these incidents for what they were. And looking at some of the takeaways from this case study, you have preparation makes virality look accidental. So again, when Me Too took off, most people thought it was a kind of a viral moment, but really it was a decade of groundwork that built the credibility and the infrastructure that enabled the movement to move forward and for rapid adoption. Two is simplicity drives scale. So those two words, Me Too, became a universal rallying cry, and it lowered the barrier to participation. So it was something very simple that everyone could do on their social media that could share their story. So participation picked up because it was something that anyone could do from anywhere, and it really amplified the reach of the movement. The third takeaway would be influence requires alignment. So, with the Me Too movement, there were multiple journalists, celebrities, and activists that all kind of played a role. There were different groups that had different kinds of power. Um, and the movement scaled because those different groups and power bases lined up and reinforced each other instead of pulling in opposite directions. And finally, timing is always the ultimate catalyst. So the cultural environment that we were in when the Me Too movement started was already kind of prime for the ignition of what happened. So again, timing is always important. Now, going back to what we had talked about, that five-stage blueprint, we can look at the Me Too movement and how it fell into those five stages. So one, you had the emotional catalyst. So that emotional catalyst was the New York Times and New Yorker story about Weinstein. That's what really kind of set everything off. The tribal signal was Alyssa Milano's tweet posting of Me Too. So once that hashtag really kind of started spreading, everyone could do it by using that hashtag. You were kind of telling the world that you were part of this movement and you believed in the movement. The third stage, again, was the action ritual. So that ritual became sharing stories, whether that was your own stories, amplifying the stories of others, and then also calling out institutions and those who had kind of broke uh, these social rules of how people should be treated. So again, that was the action ritual, was the sharing of stories and calling out those who had broke those rules. The fourth stage, being the victory narrative, was as high profile men face consequences during the Me Too movement, or there are more accusations. The narrative really started to become speaking up works. Accountability is possible. So every time you heard about another high profile man who had been kind of brought down because of the Me Too movement, it really gave more momentum to the movement because people saw that there was a victory at the end, that we were going to move into a society where this was no longer stood for. And then that last piece was the legacy lock-in. So we started to see harassment policies were revamped, zero tolerance frameworks were adopted, and public expectations started to shift. Want to move into our next case study, and I tried to find one that was a little more international. But in late 2018, as many of us may know, France erupted with the Yellow Vest protests over fuel taxes and economic inequality. And social media really amplified the visibility of this movement. It looked like it was pure grassroots uprising of ordinary citizens spontaneously organizing. But there's kind of a hidden layer to this, and this is where we want to talk about the unethical piece. The real economic grievances existed. That part was genuine. Decentralized organizing and horizontal structure, social media coordination, all those things were really happening. Those that was genuine. But what we started to see as the movement went on and towards the end is that external actors, whether that was far right groups, far left groups, some foreign entities, had started to inject some divisive messaging. There was coordinated bot campaigns that amplified the extreme pieces of the movement. Content created the illusion of a more unified, a more widespread, and a more radical movement than what organically had existed. So there were certain factions who had hijacked the protests to push agendas that were completely unrelated to the original economic concerns. And it started to be more about political destabilization and ideological goals. And so during this movement, what was happening was the violence started to draw international attention. It shifted the story from economic concerns to the chaos and the disorder. Public perceptions of the movement became fragmented, and the media narratives really started highlighting this disruption over the underlying grievances, which what is what the movement was really all about. So that was influenced by those amplified messages from external actors, not those within the movement itself. And so what was happening is, and what we want to look at is perception is power. So these external actors had leveraged the appearance of this grassroots movement of the Yellow Vests, and its legitimacy to influence other narratives. They had hijacked that narrative. And so the original economic messaging was partially eclipsed by ideological framing of people outside of the group. And as we talked about, there was amplification of these narratives by bots and coordinated campaigns that really made the movement seem larger than it was and more extreme than it was organically. And the ethical blind spot that we want to look at here is that genuine citizen concerns in this movement were co-opted to serve broader agendas. So again, what started out as a grassroots movement moved into something much bigger, but it was kind of done in the shadows, and the general public didn't really know what was happening in the beginning. And so we want to look at some strategic takeaways from this case study. So one, you have movements can be real, but and engineered at the same time. So there were authentic grievances, and those can coexist with the manipulated narrative that was happening. And so what the public sees may not always reflect reality. And that's really the point when groups kind of take over a movement. Two, control versus chaos. So once external actors start to influence a moment or a movement, the original narrative can be lost. And so whenever we're part of a movement or kind of building a movement, we want to keep that in mind that what we started can be co-opted by others, and the narrative will start to shift if we're not careful. Third is social media, as we all know, is a double-edged sword. So amplification on social media accelerated engagement with the movement, but it also enabled those who were using the movement for more nefarious reasons to distort the narrative and for that to spread its scale. Then we have transparency and verification and why it matters. So, in a fast moving social movement, independent verification of claims and context is always critical. So, as communicators, we have to understand as the movement moves along that we always have to be sharing the context and claims of that movement and what's happening to make sure that other groups or other people are not co opting our narrative. And again, we can look at that five-stage blueprint that I talked about and see that this movement works through those. So the emotional catalyst for the yellow vest was the proposed fuel tax increase in France. That tribal signal was the yellow vest itself. So it signaled that people were part of that group and part of that movement. Stage three, you have the action ritual. So participation in marches, blockades, protests, etc. These were all actions that people were asked to take to be part of that movement. Moving on to stage four, you have the victory narrative. So when President Macron suspended the fuel tax hike, the movement scored a headline victory that, ordinary people were forcing the government to reverse course. So they were able to share what was happening and look to victory down the road for what their movement was working towards. And then last, you have stage five, which was the legacy lock-in. So that there was long-term political pressure on the administration in France, a reorientation of French public debate towards inequality and what that means. And then there was more scrutiny of policies that affected the working class. So these were all things that became the legacy of the movement. Oops, sorry. So, and I know I'm going through this a little fast, but I want to make sure we get everything in here. We've looked at markets, we've looked at movements and some case studies, and now I want to go a little bit deeper and kind of look at how PR affects the individual person in the individual mind. So our brains didn't evolve for the information age that we're in. So cognitive psychologist Daniel Levitin explains in his book, The Organized Mind, that we're trying to force an attentional system that's designed for survival in small groups to process thousands of competing messages simultaneously. And our mind wasn't built to do that. So multitasking is kind of the enemy of focused attention. And I'm sure we've all had this experience to kind of illustrate how we have so many things competing for our attention that we kind of reach overload. Is if anyone has ever been driving somewhere that they don't really know where they're going, they have a destination in mind, and they're looking for a certain road or a certain turn. We will instinctively, as we're trying to navigate, turn down the radio, or we'll ask passengers in our car to stop talking. And why is that? Well, it's because we've reached that cognitive limit. There's so much going on, so much kind of pulling our attention that we can't focus on what's important. And that's really what's happening to us in the information age with social media and everything that's coming at us. We have so much competing for our attention that we really can't focus on any one thing, which then leads to how the public is manipulated into different perceptions, misinformation, disinformation, uh, misunderstandings. And so unethical actors also understand this, and so they use PR to exploit these vulnerabilities that we have, that we're not able to give 100% of our attention to any one thing. And so as we move through this last piece, everything I'm about to show you again is dual-edged with PR. The same techniques in PR can be used to educate and persuade ethically, or they can be used to manipulate and deceive. The tools really are neutral. It's the application and the PR practitioner that determines the ethics of the practice. So real quick, going to look at a few techniques. And the first is the availability cascade. So an availability cascade is a self-reinforcing process where a belief gains traction simply because it's repeated over and over again. And repetition makes whatever it is that we're trying to share, it makes it more plausible and then widely accepted. Even if evidence hasn't changed, if we hear something over and over again, we tend to start to believe what we've heard. And there's three mechanisms that work under this technique. So you have the illusionary truth effect, which again is just about repeating information. And the more we hear something, the truer it sounds to us. And I think that's why we'll see on social media when people start to hear things over and over again, it starts to sound true, even if they haven't necessarily been shown evidence that what they're being told is true. People start to it gets into our heads, and we start to see that as the truth. You have recency bias, which is the latest information always seems most important. So, kind of the last thing that we heard about something tends to stick in our mind as the most important. And then perceived validation, which is multiple sources creating an illusion of consensus. Again, that's what we're seeing in social media. We see so many people repeating the same thing that after a while we start to think, well, everybody believes this, everybody is talking about this. And before I get into the second technique, the ethical use of this is that you can reinforce critical public information. So when you have safe,
I'm afraid we're a little bit short of time, Jared. I mean, just a
okay,
quick reminder. Thank you very much.
okay, I'll try to get through this real quick. I may not be able to get into the case studies for this piece, so I'll do this real quick and then we'll move on. But so the ethical piece of this is safety campaigns, emergency preparedness, public health messaging. These are all ways that can be used ethically. Unethical use would be spreading misleading information. And again, this is why misinformation, disinformation, and misunderstandings have become prevalent in our society. The second technique is social proof loop, which is just a self-perpetuating cycle where reviews, testimonials, real-time activities starts to inspire new participants into a movement or buying a product, which then generates more social proof. And it's just this process that feeds itself. And the three drivers under that are just social proof, trust of what others are doing. We have a fear of missing out, so it triggers that urgency. And then testimonials from people that we feel are credible, and it mirrors what we're feeling. So therefore, we tend to jump on the bandwagon. The ethical use of this technique would be highlighting widespread beneficial behaviors like recycling, a charitable giving drive, something that shows community participation. Unethical things would be we've seen a lot of celebrities who may have a product they're selling. They hype that product. They only produce a small amount of that product so that when it launches, they can say we sold out within 30 minutes, within an hour, which drives this purchasing frenzy. So again, when you're purposely kind of deceiving people about the amount of product you have and you're only creating a small uh, base to sell, it tends to be a little more unethical because you're not being transparent with your public. Uh, and then that a third technique is authority transfer. So this just comes from when we look at someone as an authority figure, and we tend to trust them. We trust what they're telling us. When they tell us about a product or an organization they believe in, it creates this halo effect. So their credibility rubs off on uh, that organization or that product, which gives it legitimacy. And then also when we're showed, charts or things that look scientific, we tend to believe that more. So the ethical use, and I'm sorry I'm going through this a little fast, but the ethical use for this technique would be sharing credible research to educate. So Harvard nutrition studies, CDC public advisories, legitimate expertise that we're trying to guide public understanding. These are all ethical uses. And then that unethical use would just be when we're using or borrowing someone's prestige just to legitimize a false claim. So again, this misinformation that we talk about. Let me real quick. If anyone wants to see these slides, I can always share them, but I had a couple of case studies with Theranos, which most of us probably also know, and kind of how they used some of these things to perpetuate misinformation and to get people to believe what it was they were selling. Another case study was Airbnb, just how they kind of shifted the public's mindset of, we're always taught as children, never go into a stranger's home. And they kind of shifted the public's mindset into everyone's home kind of became a place where we could stay. So that's another case study that I shared, and I can always share this with you guys later since we're running out of time. But what does all of this mean? What am I trying to share? We've traveled through these arenas, markets where narratives moves billions. We had Apple building confidence. We had Musk creating volatility through his tweets. We had movements where psychological blueprints ignite change. The Me Too movement showing preparation enables that viral movement. The yellow vest revealing how authentic grievances can be hijacked. We talked a little bit, we didn't get into it real deep, but we talked a little bit about minds where cognitive vulnerabilities become leveraging points. Um, Again, we didn't get to talk about Theranos or Airbnb, but I was going to show kind of how those two case studies work in there as well. But what I really want us to look at is that every technique that we've talked about today is neutral in public relations. All of our tools are neutral tools. And the tool doesn't care about ethics, but the practitioner should. We can use availability cascades to reinforce public health messaging, or we can use it to spread disinformation. We can engineer social proof to encourage recycling, or we can use it to create artificial panic. We can transfer authority to educate with credible expertise, or we can use it to legitimize fraud, as Theranos, the company Theranos, did. But here's what I want you to take away from today. PR doesn't just communicate, it shapes reality. And when we wield it strategically, it influences what people believe, how much markets move, which movements succeed, and who or what products individuals in the public trust. And that power comes with a profound responsibility for the PR practitioner. And the more we understand these mechanisms, the more we can recognize ourselves when they're being used on us and the public. So we can identify manipulation versus persuasion, which is that unethical versus ethical use of public relations. We can advocate for ethical practice in our organizations, and we can also build campaigns that educate rather than exploit. So now, as we're kind of ending this masterclass, we all have a choice. We can use the knowledge that we have and we've learned to build trust, to create genuine value for our public, and we can inspire positive change in movements, or we can use it to exploit vulnerabilities for short-term gain for our organizations. The techniques that we've talked about today, the tools in public relations, they work either way. The market, again, doesn't care, movements don't care, and the human mind doesn't care how we're using them. But we as PR practitioners should care, again, because we don't just shape perceptions, but we're shaping culture, we're shaping markets, and really we're shaping democracy itself. So that invisible force that I talked about in the very beginning, it has a voice. And we just want to make sure that all PR practitioners are saying something that's worth happening, or excuse me, worth hearing. I want to thank everybody. I know we had to rush through that last part because we were running out of time. Again, I'm happy to share these case studies with anyone that wants to see them. I want to thank Maxim and his team for having me. This is, this is something that I'm really passionate about, and I think something that we all need to constantly be looking at about how we're using public relations to better the world and better society. So happy to talk to anyone who wants to connect. So I'm going to share my information up on the screen. Connect with me on social media through LinkedIn. If anyone wants to book a quick 15-minute strategy session or just a virtual chat and coffee, I put a link there too. And I'd love to hear if we have time, Maxim, or if not, maybe we can email them. But any questions, thoughts on what was talked about today, any takeaways, excuse me. And Maxim, I'll turn it back over to you.
Jared, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Very interesting. I mean, we are a little bit short of time, of course, because, morning in the US, late afternoon in Europe, evening in Asia, and all we have clients, tasks, and whatever. But of course, we have time for questions. So, dear friends, if you have questions, really comprehensive presentation, very interesting. I'll make a summary. I'm just testing my new gadget because it's brand new. So I wanted to check how it will work, and I will send back this. By the way, the full video will be very soon on our website. I hope early next week. But ladies and gentlemen, you have a floor for questions, remarks, agreements, disagreements.
And also, I'm noticing in the chat, people are asking to see the slides. So Maxim, I'll make sure your team gets a copy of it, and we can share that with whoever was here today.
Excellent. Do we have any notes? Any of you? Namibia, Spain, South Africa, Thailand, Indonesia, Hungary.
I think everyone's afraid to get on camera.
Anita. Anita, Jona Podkivana. So you have the floor. Jona.
Thank you very much. It was absolutely crazy and cool.
Köszönöm szépen.
Nagyon ügyes vagy.
Do you have anything to comment? Or in Hungary, the public relations market is very well developed, especially developed personally by the Prime Minister. Kidding.
Yes, Victor is very.
Well, we know that. He's the most favorite person in the United States already.
Yes, no. We're
So,
working.
Anita, are you in the public relations business?
Yes, I work a marketing agency, and we work on a lot of industry and big or little company too.
Do you do PR or advertising or only marketing or what?
I work on PR. I copywriter and communication specialist, and my colleagues work on other.
Okay.
Sorry.
And you well my Hungarian sister Zsofia Lakatos, right?
Yes, Sophie is
Tell her my love.
He's a very good person.
Yes, we used to. No, we still work together. She's on our advisory board in the World Communications Forum. But we work together with her and with Gabor, from Capital. We worked for maybe 25 years together.
The world is very little.
And it becomes smaller and smaller.
Yes.
We know the world is small, but can we imagine that somewhere in the middle of the United States, Jared Meade will talk to us, and Anita from Hungary will join us, and people from Namibia and Nigeria and Zambia will be with us. It's the beauty of this business. Any questions to our dear speaker?
I have no text.
Okay, so just a quick reminder, especially to Anita and to our friends from Africa. If you are not members of WCFA, please become members. Our brilliant professional colleague Vasilena will respond to you, will accept your nominations or applications, and will send you certificates. By the way, all of you, you will receive the ones who send our names to us. You will receive from Vasilena a personal certificate for joining today the presentation, the beautiful presentation of Jared, and also apply for membership, apply for the awards. We are launching the Davos Communications Awards, one of the best awards for public relations, social media, digital business marketing, because, and I'll tell you why. It's not because I'm speaking on behalf of Davos Forum, but because all the rest of the communities, they're concentrated, either digital, social media, or public relations, or marketing, or advertising, especially. They're very, very, very self-sufficient, and they're big guys advertising, like Sir Martin Sorrell and the rest of his school, around him. But World Communications Forum is the only community which unites all those businesses in one and the same basket. And this is public relations, digital business, corporate communications, public affairs, whatever you think, education, professors, students, universities, everyone who is with us, and we'll be very happy to invite all of you to become our members, to send your applications for the awards, and to win. We cross fingers that you win. Take a look at our jury. It's a high-level professionals. This year, Lord Evans, who I'm meeting on Monday for lunch in Prague, is the chair of our awards. And we look forward also. Hey, Isaac, how did you find this camera? You were hiding the camera all those 1.5 hours. Switch on your microphone, my friend.
Yes, I have switched on.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is it Nigeria or?
It's Ghana.
It's beautiful Ghana.
Yes.
What's happening in Accra today?
Oh, everything is fine. The weather is cool.
Okay. And is this, what is this now? It's 2 o'clock?
Yeah, it's 2 o'clock in Ghana already.
What did,
It's 2:14.
you have for lunch today?
In fact, I eat fufu a lot. That's the local food.
What is the local food?
Fufu and light soup. Fufu is you use cassava and then plantain to prepare it. Then you get a goat meat or fish.
Let's make an agreement. You come to the boss in April. You represent Ghana and cook for us a Ghanaian food.
That would be fantastic.
You tell me what kind of ingredients you need.
I'll tell you.
Vegetables, meat, or whatever. I'll bring everything from Bulgaria. You come to the boss, you cook for us.
Yeah, I'll come. And quick one. The director of information service in Ghana wants to join us in Davos in April next year.
He's mostly welcome. He's mostly, and does he cook? Is he able to cook?
Yeah, she's able to cook very well.
Oh, is she? Okay, then we accept, because we made an agreement that we'll make a Ghanaian, whatever. Yeah, we do say cooking dinner.
Yes.
For all the participants. Yes.
Okay.
Tell her that she's mostly welcome.
Okay, I'll tell her.
Let her to send us message. Vasilena will respond to her, and we'll be very happy to have a good delegation from Ghana.
That'll be fine.
So
I'll get her the link. Okay.
It's one of the fastest developing countries in Africa these days.
Yes. And
especially in the real estate business. I have a lot of friends, a lot of Israelis are investing in Ghana for some reason. But if Israelis are investing somewhere, then it means that this country is a good country.
Oh, yes, that's fine.
But I know
Thank you.
from my own experience.
Thank you.
Isaac, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Everyone,
Thank you.
we love you. We love you. We love you. We love you. And hope to see you very soon.